Extensive interview with Mitt Romney. The governor stopped by earlier today. All right, Governor, I want to get people to know you a little bit here in a personal sense rather than a policy interview tonight. And the first thing I want to do is run a sound clip from the debate last week on Fox News. Go.
I've learned over time, like Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush and others, my experience in life over, 17, 18, 19 years has told me that sometimes I was wrong. Where I was wrong, I've tried to correct myself.
What was the biggest thing you were wrong about?
Well, it's probably about the issue of abortion and life. I have always opposed abortion. But when I ran for office, I thought, well, I can say and can understand the idea of leaving the law the way it is. The Supreme Court has made its decision. I'm just going to say I'll support the law and preserve the law as it exists. That was somewhat naive, it turns out, because when I became governor, I found that you can't just support it the way it is, that the law changes over time. I had a piece of legislation that came to my desk that would redefine when life began in my state, would also authorize the creation of embryos for the purpose of experimentation and ultimately destroying them. And so I said, look, I am pro-life. I will defend the sanctity of human life. I was wrong.
You vetoed that bill.
I vetoed that bill.
Right. But in the beginning, when you were campaigning in Massachusetts, a very liberal state, you said, look, my personal belief, I'm against it, but I'm not going to legislate against it because Roe v. Wade. You think that was a mistake?
Yeah, I think that was a mistake.
Okay. Now, people might say, well, listen, this is the same old Romney, because if you do in your heart believe that abortion is killing a human being, then you can't really support it, no matter what the law says.
I was simply wrong.
Did you understand the seriousness of aborting a baby in your heart? What was your mindset then?
It's hard to go back into that time frame, but my view was that the Supreme Court had made their decision, that Roe v. Wade had been settled for 25 years, that I was not going to relitigate that. Instead, that I would just say I would support the laws that existed and preserve the rights that existed under the decision of the court. And what I found was that I could not do that.
You couldn't live with it yourself?
I could not live with it. When I was faced with signing a piece of legislation that would authorize the creation and killing of human life, I could not possibly go along with that.
Do you consider yourself a conservative thinker?
I am conservative. I've become more conservative over time.
You weren't conservative when you were running Massachusetts. You were a moderate, in my opinion. What changed you into a more conservative guy?
Actually, I think my record as governor was a conservative record.
Yeah, but I mean, Romney Care is not a conservative thing. I mean, and with all due respect, the thought behind it is the government should get involved with people's health care. That's not a conservative position.
Actually, the idea, as you know, came from conservatives at the Heritage Foundation, Newt Gingrich, and the idea was this. We have today in this country an insistence that government does treat people, that people that don't have insurance are given free care by government. That was what was going on in my state. And I said, gosh, this is a problem. We're giving to people based upon the premise that government owes these people health care for free. That doesn't make sense. Personal responsibility makes more sense, where people should take responsibility for getting their own insurance rather than showing up at the emergency room and expecting government to pay for them.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, personal responsibility didn't have much to do with Romney Care because you forced everybody to buy the insurance, and if they didn't buy it, they were sanctioned by the state.
What they got was a responsibility to pick up a portion of the cost of their health insurance, right, and which in the past they were getting for free.
I'm trying to figure out why a guy like you, with a lot of business experience, a lot of policy experience, is going to the right. Why are you going there? Because as you know, there are a lot of conservatives don't trust you. They think you're a phony. You're not a conservative. You're just doing this because you want to win the primary, and then you go back and being a Massachusetts guy again.
Well, the good news is I had the same posture and the same views in my last presidential campaign 4 years ago. And you can go back and look at my record as governor. I didn't raise taxes. I cut taxes 19 times in my state, balanced the budget every year, put in place a $2 billion rainy day fund, insisted on English immersion in our schools. Look, the postures on issue after issue I took were entirely consistent with a conservative view that America is best when we invest in individuals the responsibility for their own lives.
Okay, now the race is coming down between you and Gingrich. And Gingrich is positioning himself to the right of you. And then you say about Gingrich that he's zany.
Well, his comments about the justices and the Congress sending the Capitol Police to bring in judges, that's not exactly a practical idea or a constitutional idea. And frankly, the challenge I have with regards to Newt Gingrich's conservatism is that on the two big conservative movements in the last decade, one, the effort to stop cap and trade, he sat on the sofa with Nancy Pelosi. And the second, to reform Medicare to make it financially solvent, he called that a right-wing social engineering plan.
Now, Gingrich would say, I believe, that, look, these judges are out of control. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is saying you can't even have, one nation under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, and they have to be held accountable. A lot of conservatives are going to respond to that.
Let me tell you, there are a lot of decisions by judges I vehemently disagree with, but I also agree with the Constitution. The solution to judges out of control is not to tear up the Constitution and say that the Congress of the United States becomes the now ultimate power in this country. That
what would you do about out-of-control judges?
The wonderful thing we can do about it is to follow the Constitution. In the Constitution, there is a method for removing a justice. There's also a method for reversing their decisions.
You lost on a gay marriage thing.
That's the nature of it.
Continuing now with Mitt Romney, and we begin with his take on the President of the United States. What's the matter with President Obama's leadership? You say that he's not doing a job. I mean, obviously, the unemployment rate and the economy is shaky. There's no doubt about that. What about Obama, the man? What is he missing in the leadership component, in your opinion?
Well, one, he's never been a leader before. And so a few of us looked at him and said, what do you think about selecting the man as president who's never led anything? He didn't lead in the Illinois Senate.
Review.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to be an author and an editor, but I'm talking about leading an organization, leading a group of people, growing something, hiring people, firing people, all the process of leadership. He's never had that experience. He didn't recognize that part of leadership is finding allies and friends across the aisle and building relationships of trust and respect with them, working to find common ground. And whether you do that in the private sector or in the voluntary sector, as I did at the Olympics, or in the state of Massachusetts, where my legislature was 85% Democrat, I've had the experience of leadership. This president hasn't.
Is he a socialist?
You know, I prefer to use the term that he's just over his head.
Yeah, but you got to look at his economic plan, and the economic plan was top-down, federal leadership, getting us out of the recession. We spent trillions of dollars in that. And people say, listen, the guy's a socialist. It's class warfare. That's what he's going to wage against you if you get the nomination. You're a rich guy. You're out of touch. Is he a socialist?
I consider him a big government liberal Democrat. I think as you look at his policies, you conclude that he thinks Europe got it right and we got it wrong. I think Europe got it wrong. I think Europe is not working in Europe, and I'll battle him on that day in and day out. But I'm probably not going to be calling him names so much as calling him a failure.
What happens if he wins again?
I think we hit a Greece-like wall.
We're going to be Greece?
I think before the end of his second term, if he were reelected, there's a very high risk that we would hit a financial crisis that Greece or Italy have faced. I think it's also very possible that we would continue to see very high levels of unemployment. I think you'd see industry in this country, entrepreneurs, big and small, decide to go elsewhere, to take their investment dollars to other nations. This president has put together the most anti-investment, anti-growth, and anti-job series of policies I've seen since Jimmy Carter.
What about North Korea? The nut dictator died today. And now they're setting up missiles and all of that business. And, living in a dangerous world. Do you know enough about North Korea to be able to handle that situation?
I can avail myself of the best thinking of people from around me and around the nation and look at all the options we have, evaluate those, analyze them.
But that's what Herman Cain said when he didn't know anything.
I know a great deal about North Korea, but before I would take a step with regards to North Korea, I'd bring in a lot of people, get a lot of opinions, analyze them thoroughly, and then take action that makes sense.
Dangerous nation?
A very dangerous nation. Look, we're right now with North Korea now. There's the potential that Kim Jong-un will do something provocative. When change occurs, a setting is more fragile. But there's also an opportunity in North Korea.
Maybe.
And if we're wise there, we might be able to encourage a greater degree of openness and see the kind of change there we'd hope to realize.
All right. When you hear Ron Paul say that the United States screwed up everything and it's our fault that the Muslim jihadists are attacking us and that we should be friendlier to Iran and they don't really have a nuclear weapon. When you hear a guy like that who may win Iowa, what goes through your mind?
Well, he's badly mistaken. I think the evidence points quite clearly to the fact that jihadism is not something we caused. We have to recognize that we are in conflict with jihadism, and that ultimately the idea of Iran having the nuclear weapon would suggest that fissile material may find its way, probably will find its way at some point, into the hands of Hezbollah, Hamas, or some other agent of theirs, and the world will have nuclear terror. This is unacceptable to us.
Well, you're going to have to take military action to stop it because China and Russia won't cooperate enough to strangle Iran to force them to stop it.
Probably one of the greatest failures of this president's administration, a failure of leadership, was when he decided to give Russia their #1 foreign policy objective, which was removal of our missile defense sites from Poland. He gave them that and did not get in return an agreement on their part for crippling sanctions against Iran. Unthinkable failure. If he was going to do that, get something back. And that, by the way, that would have left China out there as the last man standing. My guess is we could have pushed China hard enough.
If that was then, and this is now, and they're chugging along trying to get these nukes, and your new president's going to have to come in and do what?
I am ready to make sure that we have military options that combined with crippling sanctions.
Of course we have military options.
Well, but we have developed in a way that Iran understands we would use military options. Are
you a tough guy? You're going to stare them down and say, look, I'm going to use them? Because if you bomb Iran, that starts World War III. You know that. I mean, they're going to try to block Hormuz. Oil will double. The unintended consequences all against the United States all over the Muslim world will be horrible. That's what Iran is banking on.
Then there's the other side of the story, which is not taking action with crippling sanctions and treating them as the pariah they are and preparing military options, is if you don't do those things, that Iran has a nuclear weapon, that nuclear material will ultimately be used.
No doubt about it. So you're telling me today that you're tough enough, all right, to take that, to tell the mullahs over there, because they're calling the shots, not the Dobiop and Jimmy John. Now, look, you keep doing this, we're going to bomb you.
We have a number of things we can do short of military action, but we have to prepare now.
Right.
We have to prepare as well for military action in order to concentrate their mind, for Pete's sake.
Last question here. To me, the most serious problem facing the country is the $15 trillion debt. Okay? And you see the pinheads in Congress. They can't even get together to cut $1.2 trillion. How are you going to cut this debt down? How are you going to do it?
Yeah, three basic steps. One, eliminate a lot of programs that we don't have to have.
Give me one. What do you eliminate?
Well, Obamacare is the easiest, but then there are others. Number two, take a lot of programs that are growing at an uncontrolled rate, like Medicaid, turn it back to the states and say that's going to grow now at the CPI plus 1%. That saves $100 billion a year. And number three, we cut workforce by 10% through attrition. We link federal pay with the pay that exists in the private sector. That's worth $47 billion a year. And then reform Social Security and Medicare, not for current retirees, but for the next retirees.
Yeah, they're going to be mad at you, though. We appreciate you coming on in. Good luck in the campaign.
Thanks, Bill. Good to be with you.